In the late 1960s, a man began sending letters to newspapers across California. He didn't ask for money. He didn't try to hide. Instead, he bragged about murder. Inside those envelopes were coded messages, strange symbols, and chilling details only a killer could know. Each letter was signed with the same strange mark, a circle with a cross through it. The man who sent them called himself Zodiac. For police departments across California, the letters created a nightmare. A killer was openly mocking investigators, challenging them to catch him, and promising there would be more victims if they failed. But the most terrifying part was this: the Zodiac killer was telling the truth. At the time, America was already living through a turbulent era. The Vietnam War dominated the headlines. Protests filled the streets of major cities. A trust in authority was beginning to crack. Then the murders began. Couples parked in quiet lovers' lanes around Vallejo. California were suddenly being attacked in the dark. The shootings appeared random. There was no robbery, no warning, and no clear reason. Just violence that arrived without explanation. Local police departments at first treated each attack as an isolated crime. But it didn't take long before investigators realized they were dealing with something much more disturbing, because the killer wasn't finished. On December 20th, 1968, two teenagers drove to a remote road just outside Vallejo. Their names were David Faraday and Betty Lou Jensen. They had been on their first date. The couple parked their car along Lake Herman Road, a lonely stretch of highway surrounded by fields and darkness. Sometime before midnight, another vehicle pulled up nearby. No one knows exactly what happened in those next few moments, but when police arrived later that night, they found David Faraday dead inside the car. Betty Lou Jensen had been shot while trying to run. The killer was gone. No witnesses, no clear suspects, no explanation. For investigators, the crime was deeply unsettling, but at the time they had no reason to believe it was the beginning of something larger. They were wrong. Just 7 months later, another young couple parked in a car late at night. This time the location was Blue Rock Springs Park, also near Vallejo. Inside the car were Darlene Ferrin and Michael Mageau. Shortly after midnight on July 4th, 1969, a car slowly entered the parking lot and stopped behind them. The driver stepped out and walked toward the couple. At first, Michael Mageau thought it might be a police officer approaching the vehicle, but the man said nothing. Instead, he suddenly raised a gun and began firing through the window. Darlene Ferrin was hit multiple times. Michael Mageau was seriously wounded, but survived the attack. The gunman returned to his car and drove away into the darkness. But what happened next would transform the case into one of the most terrifying mysteries in American history. Because less than an hour later, the phone rang. At 12:40 a.m., a call came into the Vallejo Police Department. The voice on the line sounded calm, almost emotionless. The caller gave the exact location of the shooting at Blue Rock Springs Park. Then he said something that shocked the dispatcher. And the man claimed responsibility for both attacks, the one that had just happened, and the double murder months earlier on Lake Herman Road. Then he calmly described where police could find the victims. After delivering the message, the caller simply hung up. Investigators rushed to trace the call. They discovered it had been placed from a payphone just a few blocks away from the police station itself. By the time officers arrived at the phone booth, the man responsible had vanished. But within weeks, the killer would reveal himself again, not through another attack. This time he would write, and those letters would make his name famous around the world. On August 1st, 1969, 3 newspapers in Northern California received nearly identical letters. The envelopes arrived at the offices of the San Francisco Chronicle, the San Francisco Examiner, and the Vallejo Times-Herald. Inside each envelope was a handwritten message. The author claimed responsibility for the murders of David Faraday, Betty Lou Jensen, and Darlene Ferrin. But the writer didn't stop there. To prove his claims were real, he included details about the attacks that had never been released to the public. specific facts only the killer and the police could have known. At the bottom of each letter was a demand. The writer insisted the newspapers publish his message on the front page. If they refused, he warned, he would begin killing again. Along with the letters came something else, a strange coded message made up of symbols, triangles, and unusual characters. Each newspaper had received one part of the same puzzle. When the three sections were combined, and they formed a 408-symbol cryptogram, the killer claimed the message revealed his identity, but only if someone could solve it. Police cryptographers began studying the code, hoping it might reveal the name of the man responsible. Days passed with no answer. The strange symbols appeared in newspapers across the country. Readers stared at the puzzle, trying to understand what it meant. Then, far from the crime scenes, a school teacher and his wife decided to try something themselves. In the town of Salinas, California, Donald Hardin and Betty Hardin believed the message could be cracked. They noticed patterns in the symbols. Certain characters repeated often. Others appeared in positions that suggested common words. After hours of work, the couple began translating the message piece by piece. Soon, sentences began to appear. But what the code revealed did not give investigators the answer they were hoping for. Instead, it revealed the thoughts of the man writing the letters. The message read, "I like killing people because it is so much fun." The words continued for several disturbing lines. Then the writer made another claim. He said the people he killed would become his servants in the afterlife. But when the message ended, something important was missing. The killer had promised the cipher would reveal his name. It didn't. The identity of the Zodiac remained hidden. A week later, another letter arrived at the San Francisco Examiner. This time, the writer introduced himself with a new phrase. "This is the Zodiac speaking." For the first time, the mysterious killer had given himself a name. Once the letter included a strange symbol, a circle with a cross through it, the writer claimed the symbol represented him, and he had more demands. The Zodiac warned that if people did not wear buttons displaying his symbol, he would begin attacking school buses. He even described how he might shoot the tires of a bus and pick off the children as they ran. Police departments across Northern California were forced to take the threat seriously. School buses were suddenly placed under watch. Parents began asking questions, and investigators realized something terrifying. The killer wasn't just committing crimes. He was controlling the conversation across an entire region. By the end of the summer of 1969, the Zodiac Killer had become a national story. His letters appeared in newspapers across the United States. Television broadcasts discussed the strange symbol in the coded messages. The public watched closely, wondering what would happen next. For police departments in San Francisco, Vallejo, and surrounding cities, the investigation became urgent. Detectives studied fingerprints from the letters. They examined handwriting samples. They interviewed anyone who might have seen something unusual near the crime scenes. But the man responsible remained invisible. Then on a quiet afternoon in September 1969, the Zodiac appeared again. This time, the attack would be very different. And for the first time, one of his victims would see his face. On September 27, 1969. The afternoon sun hung quietly over the waters of Lake Berryessa, a popular recreation area north of San Francisco. Families picnicked along the shoreline, so small boats moved lazily across the lake. The peaceful setting gave no sign that it would soon become the site of one of the most unsettling attacks connected to the Zodiac case. Among the visitors that day were two college students, Brian Hartnell and Cecilia Shepard. The pair had chosen a quiet spot on a small peninsula overlooking the water. They spread out a blanket and talked, enjoying the calm afternoon. For a while, nothing seemed unusual. Then Cecilia noticed something in the distance. A man was walking toward them. At first, the figure appeared ordinary, but as he moved closer, something about his appearance stood out. The man was wearing a dark executioner-style hood that covered his entire head. Over the hood was a strange symbol, a circle with a cross through it, in the same symbol that had appeared in the letters sent by the Zodiac. Brian Hartnell later told investigators that the man calmly approached and said he had escaped from prison. He claimed he needed money and a car to reach Mexico. The story sounded rehearsed. The man spoke quietly, almost politely, but in his hand was a gun. The hooded man ordered Brian Hartnell to tie Cecilia Shepard's hands. Then he instructed Cecilia to tie Brian's hands as well. Once both victims were restrained, the stranger checked the knots himself. For a moment, the scene remained silent. Then the man pulled out a knife. What followed was quick and violent. Brian Hartnell was stabbed multiple times. Cecilia Shepard was stabbed again and again. The attacker then walked calmly away from the scene, disappearing back toward the hillside. But before leaving the area entirely, he stopped at Brian Hartnell's car, and there, using a black marker, he left a message. On the door of Brian Hartnell's white Volkswagen, the killer wrote several lines. At the top was the Zodiac symbol. Below it were the dates and locations of previous attacks. December 20th, 1968, Lake Herman Road. July 4th, 1969, Blue Rock Springs. Then he added the date of the current attack. September 27, 1969, Lake Berryessa. The message served as a signature, a record of the crimes he claimed as his own. After writing the note, the attacker walked away from the car and vanished into the surrounding hills. But the story did not end there, because one of the victims was still alive, and he had seen the killer up close. Despite his injuries, Brian Hartnell managed to survive the attack. He later gave investigators a detailed description of the man who had approached them. The killer appeared to be a white male, possibly in his late 20s or early 30s. He was about 6 feet tall and had a heavy build. His voice sounded controlled and steady, but because of the hood covering his face, Hartnell could not identify him. Meanwhile, Cecilia Shepard was transported to the hospital in critical condition. For 2 days, she fought to survive. Then she died from her injuries. Once again, the Zodiac killer had disappeared without a trace. But only 2 weeks later, he would strike again. This time, the attack would happen in the middle of a busy city. And for a brief moment, police officers would come closer to catching him than anyone realized. By October 1969, the Zodiac killer had already carried out several brutal attacks in quiet areas outside the city, but the next crime would take place somewhere very different. Late on the night of October 11th, a taxi pulled up to a curb in the upscale neighborhood of Presidio Heights in San Francisco. Behind the wheel was Paul Stein, a 29-year-old cab driver who had been working his shift that evening. His passenger had asked to be driven across the city. For Stein, it seemed like an ordinary ride. But as the taxi reached its destination, something unexpected happened. Instead of stepping out of the car, the passenger pulled out a gun. A single shot rang out inside the taxi. And in that quiet neighborhood street, Paul Stein collapsed in the driver's seat. After firing the shot, the killer did something that shocked investigators. He didn't run immediately. Instead, he calmly leaned over the driver's body and removed a piece of Paul Stein's shirt. Then he wiped down parts of the cab, apparently trying to remove fingerprints. A group of teenagers watching from a nearby house saw the entire scene unfolding. From their window, they watched as the man stepped out of the taxi and began walking down the street. Realizing what they were witnessing, the teenagers called the police. Within moments, patrol cars began heading toward the neighborhood. For the first time in the Zodiac investigation, officers were closing in while the killer was still nearby. As police units entered the area near Presidio Park, officers received a description of the suspect over the radio. But something went wrong. In the early moments of the broadcast, and the suspect was mistakenly described as a black male. Because of this error, officers were searching for the wrong person. During their patrol of the neighborhood, 2 officers passed a white man walking along the sidewalk. The man appeared calm. He walked steadily under the streetlights, moving toward the edge of the park. The officers briefly slowed their patrol car, but the man did not match the description they had received, so they continued driving. Later, investigators would realize the truth. The man those officers had seen was very likely the Zodiac killer himself, and he had walked directly past them. 3 days later, another letter arrived at the offices of the San Francisco Chronicle. Inside the envelope was a piece of fabric. Investigators quickly realized where it had come from. It was part of the shirt worn by Paul Stine on the night he was murdered. The letter confirmed what many already feared. The taxi killing had been the work of the Zodiac. In the message, the writer even described how police officers had stopped and spoken to him shortly after the crime. He mocked the investigation. He claimed he had calmly walked away while officers searched for the wrong suspect. For the detectives working the case, the letter was deeply frustrating. The killer seemed to be watching the investigation unfold in real time, and he appeared to enjoy showing how easily he could stay one step ahead. The murder of Paul Stine changed the Zodiac case dramatically. Until then, most of the attacks had taken place in quiet, isolated locations. But this killing had occurred in the middle of a major city neighborhood. Residents across San Francisco began locking their doors earlier. Taxi drivers grew nervous about picking up passengers late at night. The Zodiac's letters continued arriving in newspaper offices. Each message seemed designed to remind the public that he was still out there, still watching, still capable of striking again. Yet despite the growing attention and the massive police effort, the identity of the Zodiac killer remained hidden. But the letters he would send next would reveal something even more unsettling, because the killer began promising something far worse than the crimes he had already committed. And the entire state of California began wondering the same question. Was the Zodiac planning something bigger? As the months passed, the Zodiac killer's letters became more daring. In one note sent to the San Francisco Chronicle, when he described in chilling detail how he might attack school buses, he claimed that he could shoot at the tires as the children ran, picking off victims one by one. The letter was received by school administrators and police alike. Suddenly, parents were afraid to let their children ride the buses alone. Authorities began placing officers on patrols near school routes. Yet despite these precautions, the Zodiac seemed untouchable. He had already proven he could operate in the open, in full view of the public, and still vanish without a trace. On November 8, 1969, a new letter arrived, this time addressed to 3 newspapers at once: the San Francisco Chronicle, the San Francisco Examiner, and the Vallejo Times-Herald. Inside was a cryptogram unlike any the public had seen before. This one contained 340 symbols, more complex, more puzzling, and far more sophisticated than the 408-character cipher solved months earlier. The Zodiac wrote that the message, once decoded, would reveal his identity. Teams of police cryptographers, amateur code breakers, and even mathematics professors tried for years to crack it. And yet, despite decades of study, the cipher resisted every attempt. The message remained a haunting mystery. By the end of 1969, the Zodiac killer claimed he had killed 37 people. Investigators could only confirm a handful of victims. The discrepancy caused confusion and fear. Was the killer exaggerating to terrify the public, or were there murders that remained hidden, unknown to police? Every new letter increased anxiety in Northern California. Every cryptic symbol, every threat, reminded residents that the killer was still out there, still untouchable. San Francisco, de Vallejo, and the surrounding counties were on edge. Businesses installed extra locks. Parents insisted children stay home after dark. Police departments coordinated across city lines, exchanging tips and leads. Yet the Zodiac killer continued to taunt them. His letters were precise, detailed, and unnervingly calm. He described crime scenes with a clinical accuracy that suggested he had studied the police response. And he showed over and over again that he could evade capture, even when officers were nearby. The city realized that no one was safe, not couples parked in quiet lovers' lanes, not teens enjoying an afternoon at a lake. not a lone taxi driver in the middle of a bustling neighborhood. And as the months turned into years, the Zodiac would continue to remain invisible. By 1970, the Zodiac killer had become a legend and a nightmare. Police investigations spanned counties and cities. Suspects were questioned. Leads were followed. Yet the man responsible for dozens of murders, violent attacks, and chilling letters was never identified. Even today, the true identity of the Zodiac killer remains one of the greatest mysteries in American criminal history. The letters, the ciphers, and the messages continue to haunt historians, investigators, and true crime enthusiasts. And while time has passed, the fear he instilled in those quiet California nights still lingers in memory. Over the decades, investigators have focused on several prime suspects. The most well-known was Arthur Lee Allen, a man who lived in Vallejo and had a criminal history. Handwriting experts examined his letters, and some acquaintances recalled strange behavior. Yet despite intense scrutiny, Allen was never charged. DNA testing conducted years later failed to link him conclusively to the Zodiac letters or the crimes. Other suspects have surfaced. Men who fit certain profiles, had access to the crime areas, or exhibited obsessive behavior. But one by one, they were ruled out. The true identity of the Zodiac killer remains hidden. A man who walked among thousands, leaving a trail of fear and unanswered questions. Even now, more than 50 years later, the Zodiac killer continues to haunt the imagination. The ciphers, the letters, and the chilling details of his attacks remain in the public consciousness. Investigators and amateur code breakers still study the puzzles he left behind, hoping that one day the pieces will fall into place. But for the countless victims and families affected, the answers may never come. The man who terrorized Northern California remains the most hunted, most mysterious criminal in history, and he may never be caught. If you found the story chilling, make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. There are more mysteries like this, more killers who vanished without a trace, and more stories that push the limits of what we think we know. Don't miss the next chapter of true crime history. Subscribe now and join us as we uncover the secrets behind the world's most infamous crimes.